I'm dreaming you and I. All my darkest fears are coming outside. We got a billion races, we got this melody. And you can trust me, baby, we got everything. Call me whenever you feel alone, babe. And when you need to cry, I'll be by your side. Call me whenever you need someone, babe. And when you need to escape from 1,000 fires, I'm gonna kiss you wherever you are. And I'm gonna miss you, I will never lie. Call me whenever you need someone, babe. We're running in the jungle of love. Jungle of love.
Pop, 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 pop. Everything good, everything good, everything good.
Listen to my conditions, I got you on my mind. You were stuck in my head and I don't know why. We got a billion races, we got this melody. And you can trust me, baby, we got everything. Call me whenever you feel alone, babe. And when you need to cry, I'll be by your side. Call me whenever you need someone, babe. And when you need to escape from 1,000 fires, I'm gonna kiss you wherever you are. And I'm gonna miss you, I will never lie. Call me whenever you need someone, babe. We're running in the jungle of love.
I'm taking it slow. Just go with the flow.
Jungle of love.
My knees on the floor. I'm begging you. It's you I adore. You took me to see Versailles in the middle of July. I'll fall into the deep end, giving into my feelings. Afraid to go on this ride. I'm scared to crash inside. This time I might be speeding. I'm taking it slow, but I just want more. I'm taking it slow, just go with the flow. I'm taking it slow, but I just want more. I'm taking it slow, just go with
Alright, just give me a moment. I didn't actually mean to switch to my live cam so quickly, but hey, what are you going to do? Just rearranging a couple things. Don't need that up. But anyways, they're very handy. No copyright sounds if you're into that sort of music. We're going to start over here. Don't need that up anymore because I can see everything. Just give me a moment. One sec. Well, that sounds terrible. Forgive me, people. I'm just trying to rearrange some stuff in my stream settings. It's being annoying. In the meantime, I'll put the tunes back on. Alrighty then. This is what we have to do. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to see the actual chat or not during it. If not, I'll have to pull it up on my phone next to me. Then it'll do for now. How's everybody going today? I've tried making some changes. To previously, I was doing some testing like last week and before that. To make sure that I'm prepared to do things like this. I definitely want to work on this frame though. I'm not a fan of the color, but whatever. So yeah, I've got the chat coming up down here. That's great. I saw a couple of your comments before I turned the microphone on. Thank you for those. I saw one saying I'm looking forward to hearing what I have to say and so forth. Yeah, hopefully you enjoy it. I think today I'm going to start off and focus on Korowai Manaki and the shambles that is the youth justice system in our country at the moment. It is worth pointing out that this is about a month old now, but it's very important. It's an ongoing situation with youth justice, Korowai Manaki, and Oranga Tamariki most specifically. And then I've just got a couple of other articles to kind of go into. If you guys have any points you want to add, you're welcome to, and I can address those as we go on. But if you don't know me, then you may not be aware that I've had experience with the youth justice system, with Korowai Manaki specifically. And so I've got some insights that many people won't. And as such, I'm quite passionate about addressing them, and particularly hearing about how this place has gone downhill in the last few years is quite disappointing, because when I was there, for all intents and purposes, the staff were, I wouldn't call corrupt or abusing their power or anything like that. If anything, doing what they can to put the young offenders on the right track, even if they didn't have the resources and the systems in place to do so, because fundamentally the system isn't set up to do that. And so that's always, that's a real big disappointment with that in that respect. But yes, starting off with Korowai Manaki's staff, smuggling in contraband, play fighting with youth offenders, and so forth. So, staff at an Auckland youth justice facility are smuggling in contraband, roughing up children, and silencing any informants, a damning report from the Children and Young People's Commission has found. Mana Mokopuna conducted an unannounced visit to Korowai Manaki in Wiri in February due to concerns raised with the commission by members of the public. The report released in June showed that goings-on at that facility did not reach the threshold for torture, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Oh well, what a relief that I didn't meet that I did not meet those things. However, there were serious concerns regarding staff practices and a lack of stable leadership. Between October 2023 and February 2024, there were more than 20 recorded incidents of young offenders found either smoking or in possession of drugs. Now, for me personally, I have, seen people, I didn't see the drugs, but I've definitely seen smoking. And in one occasion, a couple guys, they had a couple cigarettes. They they stole the toaster at breakfast time. They ran into another room, barricaded the door. They do that by getting like little pieces of pencil lead and they jam it in the lock, so the staff have a hard time unlocking the door. And then they ran in there, plugged in the toaster, and used the toaster to light their cigarettes that they had smuggled in by someone who'd recently come in. So it was, one could argue, quite humorous. I'm just going to ensure that the always show messages is on, just in case I miss things. I can go back to them. All right. So I've definitely seen people smoking. In fact, I even took part in getting a little bit drunk, but that was through the use of hand sanitizer and Thrifty. Honestly, I recommend it. I do recommend it. But yes. However, there were no serious concerns regarding staff practices and a lack of stable leadership. Between October 2023 and February 2024, there were more than 20 recorded incidents of young offenders that found either smoking or possession of drugs. As well as matches and lighters, Mokopuna are making their own ignition devices that pose a personal safety and fire hazard risk, the report read, as I've said. Staff at Korowai Manaki reported to bring contraband into the residence, physically handle young offenders inappropriately, allow the use of personal mobile phones, engage in play fighting, use inappropriate language, and discourage young offenders from speaking out. Now, see, this is the stuff that I definitely didn't experience. The engage in play fighting to some degree, but it wasn't crazy. Use of inappropriate language. I mean, are you seriously going to sit there and tell them, stop swearing, stop swearing? I know you've just committed 100 crimes, but stop swearing. It's ridiculous. There's no point in policing that shit. Apart from, basically, they have a point system there, or they did when I was there. They have a point system there where they just observe your behavior for many things, like swearing and so forth, and they'll mark you down on that point system, and that point system actually gives you rewards. So, and some of it's a later curfew, and you get a few extra benefits and so forth. So you'll just automatically mark down on that. You'll know why, and they might mention at the end of the day, oh, because your language wasn't particularly good, all this sort of thing, and you just take it on the chin, you move on. The next day you try and do better. But ultimately that is on you. They don't sit there and try and police you every single moment, because that would be impractical and just cause unnecessary conflict, and in my opinion, it's pointless. But yeah, the physically handling of young offenders inappropriately, I didn't really encounter that at all in the 11 months I was there. And the bring contraband, I mean, it depends what they're calling contraband. Contraband, like the use of personal mobile phones and that sort of stuff, never saw that. But, I mean, there was staff that brought in, chocolate and that for some of their favourites, those who behaved, or one, little prize things that they put on. So, a lot of things that made the days go easier, in my experience, but nothing that was personal mobile phones or anything like that. Occasionally they might bring in a USB stick with cool movies so you can watch it. They have movie times. It is what it is. The commission found staff members were buying good behaviour from offenders with food and hygiene care items. Now, hygiene care items is a first, but food 100%. Kaimahi also disclosed that some colleagues buy compliance by asking for rent, such as used vapes and other contraband from young people, to keep the appearance of being on top of the contraband issue. That's interesting. Some staff members were found to be keeping close relationships with the offenders in the facility, exchanging social media contacts, or not reporting sexual advances from offenders, the report said. Now, I have heard of sexual relationships at other facilities whilst I was there. None that I knew of in mine, but between staff. Although there was occasionally always staff members that got a little bit closer with certain young people than probably was appropriate. I mean, I can think of one staff member who literally kind of got off on the idea of being appealing, so she deliberately didn't wear a bra, and wore white t-shirts and sweat a lot. We weren't complaining. That's all we're gonna say. But ultimately, she did keep professional outside of that, to my knowledge. Although, yeah, I mean, there was definitely some mixed messages going on there, so completely understand that. But I did 100% hear of actual sexual relationships in, I think, the Rotorua facility. So, yeah, it's a little bit dodge here and there with that respect. But you have to remember, a lot of these young offenders are 16 or 15, 16, who are already trying to act like they're in their 20s, and then some of these staff are in their early 20s. So you can see why there would be some attraction there. Obviously, though, it's not appropriate. Is it? Same goes for actual prison. There are many people who are a similar age there, and there might be attractions there, but obviously it's not on, given they are not in the environment where they should be doing such a thing. The lack of proper staff training was also an issue raised. The report said induction training was not fit for purpose, and many staff did not have the experience necessary to work with vulnerable young offenders. It said on many occasions it was difficult for investigators to distinguish young offenders from facility workers. I would have thought what they're wearing would have been enough to distinguish, but although, to be fair, all they're really wearing is a belt with a radio and stuff on it, so I kind of can't blame them. as a result of Kaimahi and Mokopuna being close in age, some Kaimahi treat Mokopuna as peers to build rapport, which is leading to blurred boundaries, and many Kaimahi using the word corrupt to describe the current operational environment and the residents. Look, 100% I could see the ability for that, and I know it happened prior, and I know it's happened since. I must have slotted in a nice grace period. Although staffing levels had improved, many Kaimahi said this was not sufficient for them to do their job well once rostered on to the units, the report said. Now, one said that the induction training does not prepare them for the realities of working and engaging with Mokopuna, and especially those with high and complex needs and who have had a range of adverse childhood experiences. Now, this door, I've got memories of this door. In fact, I remember seeing someone get assaulted just outside this door, and going in and out of a couple times. Secure unit's an interesting one. Depending on why you're there. If you're there for having a mental health episode, it's necessary, but at the same time, it's not pleasant. But if you're there because you're one of the notorious bad residents who don't behave themselves, who threaten people, who abuse people, who the staff can't control and so forth, often you'll end up here and get rewarded. So I remember one guy who this essentially became his unit, even though it's only there to manage people temporarily. He was basically moved in there, spent several weeks just there, having a MacBook computer to use. Basically, you could just go on the MacBook computer, no internet, but you had like GarageBand, so we could make tunes all day. There was, you could just kick back and listen to music and watch movies on it all day. It was really disheartening for everyone that was there trying to get on with it and behave themselves, when people like that are getting rewarded. And typically that just means they never learn their lesson. They're incentivized to misbehave. That's part of one of the reasons why these facilities just don't work in their current, in the current way that they're set up. So yeah, it's really not good. Korowai Manakia's 46 bed and is made up of 5 units. At the time of the Commission's visit in February 28 young offenders were at the unit designated as secure care. I'm presuming they were 28 over the entire period they were visiting, not at once, because there's not enough room for 28 in one. Because I believe there is, I think, a maximum of 16 in each wing in this unit. It could be 16 in each wing, unless, of course, there are 1 or 2 that they could double bunk. I don't have double bunks there. They don't have double beds. So I'm not sure how they managed that, unless they've also transferred secure care into, or merged it with the unit right next door, which is actually connected through a hallway, which has a further 6 or 8 beds. Wait, no, I think it's a maximum of 12. There's no way they had 28 at once. I mean, that's all I'm going to say. There's no way they had 28 at once. It would have been over the period. So that's interesting. But it does go to show that there is heavy reliance on it, especially for mental health concerns and overall managing of behaviours, simply because the staff aren't trained to deal with it, and the staff don't have any kind of programs kind of to support these people. I found it overall, the entire Korowai Manaaki environment, negative in terms of moving towards rehabilitation and sorting out the issues that I was having. If anything, it only exacerbated the problem. So, yeah, it really isn't all that good when I'm thinking about it like that. Now, seclusion was found to be used as a de-escalation tactic for offenders with severe mental health issues, more or less, although it typically didn't last that long, if I'm completely honest, at least not in my case. The report said the facility was not set up to meet the needs of youth offenders with mental health issues. Considering so many of them are dealing with mental health issues, that really isn't good enough, is it? And it just goes to show why it needs dramatic change. There is a critical lack of mental health trained or experienced kaimahi who can support these mokopuna therapeutically, correct. With a lack of specifically skilled kaimahi resources or equipment, detailed plans covering individual mokopuna mental health needs became redundant, and the best kaimahi could do is contact on-call crisis teams when the mokopuna escalate. Also true. It found that staff were giving MP3 players to suicidal youth offenders. Oh my goodness, tell me about it. And I chucked M&M on. despite risk assessments prohibiting the use of player or headphones. I mean, it's one of those balances. I would, yeah, I mean, I'll just use a jumper, mate. But yeah, it was one of those interesting balances, but the MP3 players are certainly ideal, because those rooms, in the secure unit particularly, it's concrete bed. If you have a mattress, that's a good day. Typically you do, but sometimes you don't. And you have pretty much two things you can do. Listen to the one radio station, which I think is typically Flavor, or punch the window, which is very hard. It was actually quite fun. Everything is a mental health problem these days. Well, you're not wrong, to be fair. You are not wrong. And I think the important thing to do is to acknowledge when mental health is having an impact, but not making mental health the putting the blame on mental health. There is, in many instances, that's fine, and it should be taken into account when considering how you deal with someone, whether or not there should be some leniency in sentencing and all these sorts of things. But ultimately, it should not come between whether or not someone is held accountable, unless it can be proven that they were clinically insane, in which case there is still a level of accountability that comes along with that, with how they are treated from there on out. So in the case of, we had the most Lauren Dickerson, she's going to spend a very long time in a mental health facility, irrespective of the fact that she was still found guilty and not insane. But, you know, even if she was found insane, she would pretty much be in the same position where she would be in that mental health facility, getting the treatment that she needs, be it effective or otherwise. Ultimately, what's important is that she's still held accountable for the actions, no matter what. There are youth truancy officers who do nothing to help parents. Yeah, well, yeah, I don't have too much experience with youth truancy officers myself, although I'm pretty sure my parents likely have at least had phone calls. I can't say I know enough about youth truancy to comment, but I have no doubt that's probably a pretty accurate representation of youth truancy officers. Advocates prevented from entering units. The Commission also found essential independent advocates were not always able to speak with mokopuna at the facility. There were some occasions where they were prevented from entering units, resulting in prolonged periods between visits for some mokopuna. It was also told of instances where young offenders were prevented from accessing the grievance forms or were discouraged from doing so by staff working in the facility. I can't say I ever had a use of grievance forms there, although typically there was a reason for that, because they would kind of bend over backwards to make sure you wouldn't want to. Now, prison's a different story. It was also told of instances where young offenders... Oh, yeah, I've already said that. Many kaimahi referred to forms as snitch forms, which can deter young people from using them to voice their concerns. Honestly, I more found that staff said, don't... Yeah, I really never encountered this. There were some staff that might discourage you from snitching on other young people. Or, let's say, snitching on the staff for maybe pushing the boundaries of what they're allowed to do, but all of the things that they were pushing the boundaries for were to benefit you and make your time more enjoyable, so you weren't going to snitch on them anyway. So it's one of those things. And there was one of those things where you kind of can't... I wouldn't really blame or I wouldn't look to reprimand these staff members for the things that they did in those experiences that I had. Like, these are things like, doing like little tournaments within your unit and rewarding you with, a chocolates or a box of chocolates that they brought in, things like that, or watching a movie that isn't technically one of the ones that are, well, what's the good word for it? Considered allowed. So rather than, some stupid PG rated movie, it's, I don't know, Deadpool, right? It's not something that you're going to, I don't think personally, as someone who was there, and I think someone who has experience with working with these, it's not something that I think would be worthy of a reprimand, although you may feel differently. But yeah, those are the only real experiences I saw with kind of staff pushing the boundaries of what they're actually allowed and should not be doing. So as far as the corruption goes with that respect, from my experience, that's all it is. But clearly since then it has gone downhill massively, particularly at this residence. Several young offenders had not been visited by the Oranga Tamariki social workers for months, and workers said social workers did not always attend court appearances, medical appointments, or assessment meetings. Kaimahi reported that some social workers only provide updates when prompted and do not always make the effort to visit Mokopuna even when they are based in the local area. Yeah, I mean, mine were pretty good, so it's what it is. It's pick of the bunch, really. Lack of Māori representation. Young Māori continue to be overrepresented in places of detention, including Korowai Manaki. There's a reason for that, folks. It's because they're doing more of it. They're doing more crimes. It said minimal emphasis was placed on reducing those disparities or promoting the rights of young Māori when they were in residence. I couldn't disagree more. I mean, you can't reduce those disparities when these kids are going out, committing ram raids, laughing about it afterwards, spending the next 3 months in a youth justice facility talking about what they're going to do next time, what they're going to do differently, about how they want to escape, about them actually escaping, me watching them escape. So it's like, what do you want? What do you want them to do? Because as far as I can see, any of these disparities are on the young people, not on the facilities. And as far as their rights are concerned, the rights weren't any less, they weren't dealt with any differently to non-Māori young people that were in those residences. So it makes absolutely no sense to me. The report found Korowai Manaki no longer had a kaiwhakaui. How have I screwed that one up? A person responsible for staff training, mentoring, and support. Okay. With that role vacant, the Commission said the facility did not have the capability to support Kaimahi to meet the requirements under Section 7AA of the Oranga Tamariki Act, which outlines requirements for the agency to improve outcomes for young Māori. Honestly, they aren't doing anything more or less for young Māori in there than they're doing for young Europeans or young Islanders, or I'm not sure if I ever saw an Asian, maybe one Indian. So yeah, they're not doing any more or less. So to suggest that they aren't trying to improve outcomes on a Māori basis, it's not adding up to me. Okay. Because ultimately they like to place emphasis on improving outcomes for one ethnic group whilst ignoring the fact that they are in the same position, given the same ability to have good outcomes as everyone else there. If not more just based on having these expectations alone. And the fact that the outcome's still worse is less, in my opinion, less from what I've been able to observe on the actual system and more on the individuals themselves having no interest. Now, if the system cannot really benefit anyone, if youth justice facilities aren't benefiting any of the young people there, but we already have a disproportionate number of young Māori committing crimes, well, then there's not going to be any noticeable difference or improvement of outcomes for Māori because nothing in that system helps anyone. So I think blaming the broken system for seemingly it not improving the outcomes of tamariki Māori when it's not improving the outcomes of tamariki anyone is, it's a pointless thing to babble on about when you should just be saying it should be improving the outcomes for someone. That would be great. That would be great. And that's why personally I think the boot camps are a good step forward for the worst of the worst. At least early on. Frankly, I think it should just be optional for anyone. The finding comes as urgent Waitangi Tribunal into the repeal of Section 7AA is underway. On to the staffing issues. And the Commission also found staff practice at the facility was inconsistent. Korowai Manaki had 4 resident managers since July 2023. Shit, that's a shambles. And the lack of stability resulted in Kaimahi needing to adapt to different leadership styles and expectations. Staff members still did not have a clear understanding of what good practice looked like at Korowai Manaki. Some staff hold the view that the purpose of the residence is to secure and contain young people, whilst other Kaimahi envisage a trauma-informed therapeutic environment that provides support. I mean, this is an interesting one. To secure and contain. Now, they do a poor enough job of that as it is. Or other staff members, a trauma-informed therapeutic environment, they don't even have the means of doing that. So if one group wanted to secure and contain them, they do a borderline job at that, given the amount of escapes that there is, given the amount of free will they're given to misbehave. And the others believe in a trauma-informed therapeutic environment that provides support despite the fact that there are absolutely none of those things. And every single time they try and provide one of those things, they do so by resorting to securing and containing, which is why they have overusing of their secure unit, right? Their secure care unit. They don't have the means to it. The youth justice system is not set up to do really that. And the secure and contain is an inherently flawed system unto itself. So they can't do either. As soon as they stop arguing about it, they'll probably do a better job. Some staff told the commission they were not there to punish, whilst others saw themselves as babysitters, simply there to provide an adult presence in the units. So I think not there to punish is fair, because that's not what prison's not there for the staff. Any form of incarceration is not there for the staff to punish. The fact that they are there is the punishment. So the staff aren't there to punish. And at the same time, staff aren't there to be babysitters. The staff are there, in my opinion, to assert some level of power balance, or power imbalance in this case. Oh, hello, Georgina. And of course it was Simon. I presume we're having coffee or something. And I know it was Simon because he's talking about gingers again. Crazy prick. Have fun, Simon. But, yeah. So, the issue with the whole babysitters thing is that makes the young people think. That makes the young people think that they're on the same level, and as such, they're more inclined to misbehave, they're more likely to push the boundaries, and it's harder to secure and contain them. And that is not an attitude you want. You don't want to have the attitude you're punishing, because that's not going to get you anywhere. And you don't want to have the attitude that you're a babysitter, because that will have you getting walked over. And that will lead you to a point where you're encouraging bad behaviors, and that's going to make your job much, much harder. Ensuring that you put yourself above the inmates, above the young offenders, and making them know that they are below you, that you are there to listen to them, will ensure that they are learning what discipline is, they are learning what authority is, and hopefully that will actually help them on their journey to learning to obey authority in the future. Something that will probably fail in that environment anyway, but it's better that you set those boundaries, set those expectations, than to view yourself as a babysitter and act as such. Multiple staff described the culture as corrupt, with a lack of transparency across all levels, without clear guidance from the residence management team and Oranga Tamariki National Office. Staff have been left to fill the void with their own ideas and ways of operating. Recommendations. Of all the 10 recommendations made by the Commission to Kura Waimanaki in 2022, only one had good progress since, to ensure all staff received the full Te Waharoa induction program before working in open units. 4 recommendations had no progress, including developing a nationwide package of training programs, reviewing the grievance process, and reducing the high use of the secure care unit, restraint holds, and searches. Restraint holds are pretty minimal in what they're allowed to do anyway. It really is just a matter of keeping people separated, and that's about where it ends. This time, Mana Mokopuna made 11 recommendations to the facility, including implementing ways to mitigate contraband, providing suitable support for children with high and complex mental health needs, and reviewing its recruitment strategy. Oranga Tamariki accepted all of the recommendations. It was pleasing to note that the threshold for torture, cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment was not met during the visit to Kura Waimanaki, and the agency's Deputy Chief Executive Nicolette Dixon said this. The concerns raised and a lack of stable leadership are acknowledged, and we are continuing to work hard to address these. She said some of the interactions described between Rangitaki and Kaimahi in the report were of real concern. Where the team identified more specific safety and well-being concerns, immediate steps have been taken to ensure that these are being fully addressed. Dixon said Kura Waimanaki team was working closely with corrections to develop a memorandum of understanding for the use of drug dogs for search purposes. I'm trying to think, have I ever had the drug dogs come through? Maybe once. It was fascinating, but I think mainly once. But yeah, what is everyone in watching's thoughts on that? If you have any, I'd love to hear them. Because ultimately, do you think the system needs to be completely overhauled? Do you think we need to have minor tweaks to ensure that they are, I don't know, keeping the place secure, maybe providing a little bit more in the way of rehabilitation? Do you support the boot camps? Do you not? It's a difficult one. It's obviously gone really downhill in recent times. But, I mean, what do we do? What's the alternative? I do have, if you've followed me a long time, you'll know I have ideas around this. I don't go into them enough. I really should. I came up with like kind of a baseline justice system overhaul several years ago. It's still kind of in the back of my brain. I still have an interest in looking into it and explaining it further, but I've kind of got it tight. I've got it kind of locked down quite tight. Mainly because I think some people might think it's a little bit adventurous, or it's a lot to undertake if you're a government, for example. It would be a dramatic change. It would be quite a costly change, I imagine, although probably not quite as much of one as people might think. It would be logistically difficult. It would make the management of prisons far more complicated, but it would be for the betterment of everyone there and would actually mean the system has a chance to work. Because right now it doesn't work at this level, doesn't work in the adult level, doesn't work bloody anywhere. Then you've got the likes of Whakataka Pōkai, which is the level below this, which is dealing with people who aren't even technically allowed to be put in the youth court yet, because it's typically 10 to 13-year-olds rather than 14 to 17-year-olds, as are those in this facility. So it's extremely difficult to know just... It's extremely difficult to know just how much changes will be needed to start actually seeing some positive results. But I'll give it a quick minute break or so, and then we'll jump right back into it, talking about Chris Hipkins' claims with respect to sovereignty and whatnot.
Lions roaring in the morning sun, searching for a longer day. People feeling like the light has just come. We must never stop the way. Yeah. Birds jumping and I hear my name. Grass green into alive. Life is happy but it's so insane. We must merely make a start. Savannah, I'm coming home. Savannah, we'll never be alone. Savannah, the beauty of the world. Savannah, let's all take a roll. Savannah.
Alrighty, no need to mess around for too long. Anyways, what are we? I'm just gonna quickly check that actually turned off. Good, it did. I've got a new keyboard and it's got some nice little macros on it. It's got some good audio and thingamajiggy controls on it. So I'm very happy. As you can see, if you've been familiar with me for a while, you would have known that for a while there, I had a setup that was basically just a phone, and that's about it. I used a phone, I recorded everything on my phone, but in recent times, thank you very much to apps like Afterpay and so forth, I've been able to upgrade a lot of what I'm doing. So I recently got a new microphone, even though the lovely Captain Jack, who as far as I'm aware is still banned on X, which is an absolute crime against humanity, he hooked me up with a couple of things to get me started. Fortunately, I don't think I need most of it, mainly because I'm really, really bad at dealing with things that I didn't get myself. So it's still here. If he wants it back, he can come get it. That's absolutely fine. Nonetheless, he helped me get a move on and get set up. So he sorted me out with a PC, which I've then upgraded with the help of family members and so forth. Essentially transferred over to a brand new one in the same time. Chris Hipkins making up his own history, 100%. We'll definitely get into that. But I've also upgraded from using a phone as a camera to now I've got a new webcam, which is the same quality really, but it comes with a built-in ring light. I've also got another ring light over to my right, which allows me to essentially just change the tone a little bit. So right now I've got a slightly kind of orangey, warmy color, which is down on basically lowest level, just to, I don't know, add a little bit of color to my face very subtly. That's just to help overall balance out the lighting in the room. So that's very, very useful. And of course, I've got the microphone stand, pop filter, and so forth. And that's made it extremely easy. What I do need to get onto though is a second monitor. That'll make doing this, for example, much, much easier. I won't have to kind of half minimize my screen. I'll be able to do a lot of different things at once. Additionally, it just, as someone who's me, I want one. I want another one. There's a few more things to upgrade yet, but this is going to get me started because, unfortunately, as great as my cool little setup when I was doing a few things with Mr. Radnan Belushi, I could not continue with that. And that's it was great to have that experience, being able to use that really good equipment, have that nice backdrop, and kind of really take things out to a new level. But at least here, I can do things from home. I can take it at my own pace. I don't have to go into essentially a studio to do it, or go into an office space to do it. But of course, big thank you to Adnan for allowing that to happen. And I hope he sticks at it, especially with his podcast. His podcast is so very good. So do go over and watch the Belushi podcast whenever he drops one. And even some of his satire stuff's pretty good. So just follow Adnan Belushi, because why not? You use 2 monitors as well. I really do need another monitor so I can see what your bloody name is. Hex. Cheers, Hex. But yeah, maybe I have to talk to Simon about how he's doing his stuff to make it easier for him to see everything, because mine's miserable. Well, maybe that's why his text is so big on his overlay, but I think his looks a little bit So whatever, Simon. But yes, hopefully from here I'll be able to do this a bit more often. And I'm also one of those people that's somewhat self-conscious though. I don't like doing it when people are at home. I'm living in a very small house, so everyone can hear everything. And as much as I don't really mind, I'd rather not. So I'll have to ease into it. Fortunately, kind of a routine's kind of coming back into this house. I've got a bit more time, so we'll keep doing things like this. I'll keep improving, and obviously give me what you want. Give me all the advice that you want, and tell me where I need to improve. Well, other than that, it's whatever. I'm just waffling at this point. So let's get on to Chris Hipkins, because he likes to talk a lot of shit. Chris Hipkins claims Māori did not cede sovereignty. Although, funnily enough, he claims whilst they didn't cede sovereignty through the Treaty of Waitangi, they still ceded it at some point or lost it at some point, which is, I think, an interesting point to make. Chris Hipkins was unequivocal. The leader of Labour was asked to clarify his position on Te Ao with Moana, and the issue of Māori sovereignty has been front and centre at the major hui throughout the country following the Koroneihana the week-long celebration of King Tuhatia. Not my king. After questioning from Greens co-leader Chloe Swarbrick, the Prime Minister Christopher Luxon told Parliament he believed Māori ceded sovereignty to the Crown. On Monday night, Hipkins was adamant he believes otherwise. Matthew, enjoying your well-informed insights. Shadowband and I agree on one thing. Neither he nor I know what he is talking about. Well said. Well said. I don't think any of us know what he's talking about. It's pretty clear that if you follow the various court rulings over time, if you follow all of the academic research, if you follow the treaty settlement process, that the answer to that question is no. So, according to Chris Hipkins, based on the academic research, which we know can always be trusted, can never be questioned, if we follow the treaty settlement process, which as we know is always accurate and can never be questioned, if we follow the various court rulings over time, which as we know can never be questioned, can always be trusted, then the answer is no, Māori did not cede sovereignty by signing Te Tiriti o Waitangi. I find the court rulings the most interesting one, considering they're based on principles that don't actually exist. Principles that courts made up as a result of a Labour Party law passed in 1975, which really should have been amended the moment it was put in. You can't make a law called the Treaty of Waitangi Act and claim there are principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. Because there aren't. There never were, and there weren't for 11 years after it was made. After the Act was made, the Treaty of Waitangi Act. So, how can we sit here and pretend that the treaty principles should have any validity at all, when they didn't exist when the Act claiming they existed was made, and they didn't exist for the 11 years until a case between the Māori Council and, well, the Crown took place, and all of a sudden they cited that piece in the legislation, and the court had to come up, the judge had to come up with some baseline principles which ever since have evolved dramatically or are just malleable according to what the treaty of the Waitangi Tribunal have outlined as the treaty principles and how they work. They are malleable. They're not set in stone. The judge or whoever is the tribunal itself, they pick and choose which is appropriate in any given context, and they are all malleable. They're subject to change depending on basically the political mood of the time. That doesn't sound like something that you want to be underpinning your constitutional arrangements in this country, in my opinion. But that's what they are. They're a malleable nonsense that are used by activists and ideologues to push a narrative and their belief system on what the treaty principles are, or what the Treaty of Waitangi specifically says. It's used to distort what it says and, quite frankly, change history. But that doesn't mean the Crown doesn't have sovereignty now. Isn't that interesting? But it's funny how he doesn't go into talking about how the Crown has sovereignty now. No, that would be too much. It would be too much to explain how the Crown has sovereignty now, but it's enough to rubbish the idea that they obtained it through the only way that you can look at and think that's actually logical. Like, seriously, I have seen a thread from Liam here, everyone's favourite kind of based lawyer. But, yeah, I somewhat disagree with him. And I made, when I was when I had 12-hour suspension last week, I did kind of reply to that, but most people wouldn't have seen it because it was on a non-premium subscribing account and with 500 followers. Lieutenant Governor William Hobson proclaimed British sovereignty over the whole of New Zealand, and British government ratified in October 1840. Exactly, and it was ratified as a result of this Treaty of Waitangi being signed. Both the English text and the Māori text, it doesn't matter which one you want to reference in this case, because they both have the same meanings, albeit using different words. And that is something that people like to misrepresent. They like to say, oh no, they have different words and so they mean two different things. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I can say that the ocean is a mixture of hazel and azure. That doesn't mean I didn't just say the sky or the ocean is blue, because that's what it is. It's like you can say the same thing with dramatically different language. And the people that sit there and pretend that you can't have the same intended meaning with different wording are just gaslighting you. They're talking nonsense. They're trying to convince you that you have no idea what they're talking about and that you should listen to them. So they'll tell you and say, they'll sit there and tell you, because the English text explicitly said sovereignty and the Māori text did not explicitly say sovereignty, they mean two different things. Despite the fact that the Māori text explicitly defines sovereignty, outlining that the Māori give to the Crown, gives to the Queen of England the authority to govern. Now, unless you're unfamiliar with what sovereignty means, you'll know that sovereignty means the authority to govern. So if in the Māori text it states explicitly one has the authority to govern, or one is given the authority to govern, that means they are given the authority, by Māori in this case, to sovereignty. They have the authority to govern and as such are given sovereignty. Same meaning, different language. It's not very hard. But that's the gaslighting of academia and of, well, politicians and of the courts and of every activist and nonsensical ideologue out there. Given Te Tiriti has always been about recognising the unique constitutional arrangement between Rangatira on behalf of iwi and Hapu and William Hobson on behalf of the English Crown, how does Hipkins see that playing out in contemporary times? It has always been about recognising the unique constitutional arrangement between Rangatira and William Hobson. I would probably argue against that as well. That's not what it's about. It's about Māori handing over sovereignty to the Crown and understanding their place in accordance with this new structure. That is what it's about. It is about understanding that they recognise the Crown as the sovereign, recognise the Crown's right to establish governments over all of the lands, in accordance with Article 1, understanding that they do still retain some rights and duties with respect to their land ownership and their taonga, but that the Crown has the right of preemption on that land, particularly. And that they have the same rights and duties under law as British subjects. And that is, and those rights and duties are given to them through the process of governance, through the process of having the authority to govern. You see, these rights and duties that the Crown promises cannot be given to them unless the Crown has the authority to give them rights and duties. The Crown has the authority to recognise them as subjects. So that's something that, again, is conveniently ignored in every narrative that you hear. I think the way we exercise our authority to reflect the principles, and that includes Article 2 of the treaty, which recognises Tino Rangatiratanga, that's been the conversation. That's what we've spent the last 4 or 5 decades working out how to do that. The treaty made the one law for Māori and Pākehā. If you think these things are wrong and bad, then blame our ancestors who gave away their rights in the days when they were powerful. Ngata 1922. Forgive me, I did read that awfully poorly. Let me repeat that. The treaty made the one law for Māori and Pākehā. If you think these things are wrong and bad, and then blame our ancestors who gave away their rights in the days when they were powerful. Exactly. I feel like I understand what is the point being said there, which is that essentially those in the current day are blaming people of the past for doing things that I don't like now. And ultimately, you can't blame the white man for the actions of your own ancestors. That's just stupid. Now, it doesn't encapsulate into nice, neat little sound bites because there are going to be areas where it's a bit messy as we work our way through what this looks like. But simply saying, let's just stop all of that and start again in a way that writes Māori out of the picture, which is what the Treaty Principles Bill is based on, Oh my goodness. But simply saying, let's just stop all of that and start again in a way that writes Māori out of the picture. Which is, I swear Chris Hipkins can't actually put a good sentence together. It's extremely hard to read this. But simply saying, let's just stop all of that and start again, and in a way that writes Māori out of the picture, which is what the Treaty Principles Bill, based on the reports we've had so far, suggests government want to do. I think it's just the wrong approach. The Treaty Principles Bill couldn't be doing anything other than that. Well, I mean, I should rephrase that. The Treaty Principles Bill is doing everything other than that. It is saying, hey Māori, we actually respect you. We respect your ability to be elected on your own merits. We respect your ability to be treated the same as everyone else in this society without having to be given a hand up, without having to have other laws put in place to try and help you because you're supposedly oppressed and incapable of doing any of these things for yourself. We respect you, we view you as equals, and as such we are going to treat you as equals. It is absolutely nothing about writing Māori out of the picture. This should be telling Māori that they are of value, that they are indeed equals, and that when they have their representation in Parliament, as does everyone else, they will be viewed as equals. Right now, you think about all of these conflicts, the little disagreements at like local government level with Māori wards, with Māori electorates, and how people talk about Māori representatives in those positions. Those Māori representatives are given more flack by the community because they're in Māori wards, because they're in Māori electorates. They are not looked at as equals because they're in Māori wards, because they are in Māori electorates. I don't look at the likes of Tama Pōtaka and view him as any less than the non-Māori candidate in another electorate, because he got into an electorate that anyone can stand for, or that anyone can vote for, most specifically. Because it is worth bearing in mind that technically anyone can stand in a Māori electorate, but only Māori are allowed to vote for them. So these Māori electorates, these Māori wards do a disservice to Māori and actually create friction and the sense of inequality between Māori and non-Māori. It's a disservice to Māori. And so getting rid of them is good. Supporting everyone being treated the same is a positive step towards making sure that Māori are in the picture, but not in the picture by force or by requirement, but in the picture on merit, and in the picture to an extent where we don't have any qualms as a society of viewing these people as equals, because we are indeed under law treating them as equals. Until such time as we start doing that, there will always be a conflict. When asked how he might deal with dog whistling around co-governance, the former Prime Minister insisted he would challenge it head on. Now, it's funny how essentially bringing up co-governance in opposition to it equals dog whistling. This is just nonsense. This is just fear-mongering by the left. Now, forgive me one sec. I do need to take just a moment to get some air into this room because I am sweating my balls off and I feel extremely short of breath. So just give me a moment, please. I do think this will suffice, but I'll just have a quick drink. Yes, it's no sugar. I'm going to die of cancer. Should be right. Actually, speaking of my weight update, I'm now down to around 76 kilograms. And if you didn't know, I did start more of a ketovore diet around, November last year. Or December last year. But yeah, I've kind of transitioned from a carnivore to more of a ketovore because generally speaking, if I'm making a meal for myself, it's only going to be meat and eggs. But I'm still happy to just kind of limit my carb intake and eat little bits and pieces every now and then and treat myself, because I think it's important to treat yourself. At this point, it's managing the weight and managing the health. And it's all working out for me. So I like to treat myself. I'm not going to stop myself having a whiskey, am I? I'm not going to say no to the odd bit of dessert every now and then. I'm not going to say no to hot chips once a week or something like that, depending. I have cheat days. I have carb loading days. It's working. It's working. So I've now dropped around 19 kilos since, well, most of that since like January. And a good chunk of it was by March. So yeah, it's going well. At my heaviest, I was around 108 kilograms. You know, this time last year, I was about 95. So happy. But back onto this, and now I've got some air coming in. I think the other issue is I've got my window closed. So that's, of course, going to make things a bit stuffy. So I think that was something that we were reluctant to do as a government, and I think we'll do a lot more of it. Where I see things that are designed deliberately to scratch a racist itch, I'll call them out, and I'll call them out in strong terms. You can't solve these intergenerational challenges with slogans. You've actually got to be more thoughtful than that. Well, you see, the thing is, your old boss, Jacinda Ardern, she tried to, well, deal and solve with intergenerational challenges, with poverty, and pretty much everything that she could talk about with slogans like, let's do this. Let's keep moving. And she achieved jack shit, if you don't remember. She achieved jack shit. So maybe you're better than her, Chippy, but I do believe that you're integral in helping her achieve jack shit. The Labour leader admitted his own government failed to allay the fears of New Zealanders in the lead up to the election. In areas like water reform and that debate around code governance, I think as a government, we let that one get away on us. And what we were doing there was justifiable. It was explainable, and we didn't make the public case strong enough, and we should have. The interesting thing about the whole Three Waters thing is I was listening to Tim Beveridge on Newstalk ZB, and Tim Beveridge, as far as Newstalk ZB goes, is one of the better ones. But I do think he kind of missed the mark with the conversation about Three Waters that came up the other night when I was in the car. And he was saying that, you know, generally speaking, the anti-Three Waters campaign was a bit of a bust. And he did make one fair point about the bumper stickers having stopped with an exclamation mark after the stop rather than after the Three Waters. So it didn't really make sense grammatically. But then he kind of made the point that kind of the whole basis of their opposition wasn't really rooted in fact or anything like that. I'm like, he kind of ignored the actual main points of opposition, which was the centralization of council assets, or taking away council assets and merging them with a bunch of other councils so that you kind of didn't have the same level of control. But not only that, the actual primary issue was the imbalance of the governance structure of it, having like 50-50 iwi and non-Māori representation, and that being on top of the council that you belong to already losing effective control over their assets is kind of, that's bad on its own. And then you add the fact that 50% of that control is then going to be done by iwi representatives who have like some degree of veto power. I mean, how can you not sit there as a New Zealander, as someone who you may be in a area that has really, really good water management? How can you sit there and not oppose that? Like, the whole thing is, oh well, it's in theory probably going to be more expensive now, and rates are rising and all this. Rates were going to rise a shit ton anyway. This doesn't help, sure. Having to go back on things that should never have happened in the first place, that they sunk billions into, that's going to cost money, sure. It's not ideal. None of us want that. But at the same time, the downsides of the Three Waters legislation that the last government passed were too big to let it stand. It needed to be dramatically amended or repealed. It had to happen. So suggesting that the anti-Three Waters thing didn't really have a basis, that it was misguided, that's just ridiculous in my opinion. And it was very, very important that it was either amended dramatically or repealed. And so at least this government's made moves in that direction. Now, Labour has watched much of its policies and strategies dismantled in just under 9 months. Funny that, eh? And thank goodness. The scale and pace of change has seen the government break records for the number of laws it has passed in the first 100 days, according to Sir Geoffrey Palmer, who in 1985 initiated major consultations around legal recognition of Māori rights under the treaty. Palmer expressed concern that over 30 bills have been introduced under urgency, and these include repeal of fair pay legislation. Speaking of that, I remember being in a Discord call or in a call with someone who was actually working on the fair pay agreement legislation like last year. I have absolutely no sympathy for them whatsoever. Such arrogant pricks. And and Kartini, if you see this, you're arrogant. Sorry. Mainly your friends. You're not that much better. Enjoy life married to a lawyer. Palmer expressed concern that over 30 bills have been introduced under urgency. This includes the repeal of fair pay legislation, the disestablishment of the Māori Health Authority. I mean, the fact that that was ever established is a crime. It's a crime that that was established. It is absolutely disgusting that it was established in our nation. Nowhere in a nation like ours, in a fair democracy where we're all supposed to be treated as equals, should there be an authority based on race or ethnicity. It shouldn't happen. The last Labour government are disgusting for that. The changes to the smoke-free legislation, I think even voters for the coalition are a little bit split on that. But generally speaking, I don't think we can have much issue with the fact that they've just decided to retain the status quo before changes that hadn't even come into effect yet were set to come into effect. Ultimately, the smoke-free legislation we've had for the last 10, 20 years or whatever it is, has been working, and it has reduced smoking rates, and I don't think there was any need to take it a step further. The gang legislation, again, some view this as a little bit of an overreach on a libertarian side of things, because they don't like some of the police powers being added and things like that. But overall, the gang legislation is needed, particularly with respect to, I think, putting gangs in their place. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of sick of seeing gangs take over the streets and think they own the place. And whether you think that people should be restricted to the right to wear gang badges in public, I mean, I think there are fair arguments as to why they should have the right to wear gang badges in public, but ultimately they are used to intimidate. They are associated with criminal activity, and as such, I think both the government have a fair argument for their legislation, and people also have a fair argument as to why the legislation shouldn't be a thing. The Local Government Act around Māori wards, quite frankly, Māori wards shouldn't exist. The fact that they're making a hiss and a fuss or kicking up a roar, pretending that their rights being taken away from them, simply because they want to give the people the right to make a decision about what happens in their own regions. Like, come on, people, get over it. And the fast track approval bills, which again has been a little bit contentious, but there has been a few changes to that with respect to a few of the decision-making processes with fast track. So I think most people in the who support the coalition probably don't have too much of an issue with this. When asked if that's just what new governments do, ditch everything for previous governments, Hipkins disagrees. I mean, yes, he disagrees until there's a lot of stuff he wants to ditch, and then he'll do it anyway. If Hipkins got on tomorrow, he had the power to reverse much of what he dislikes, he would do it. So Hipkins can shut up. I think it's a feature of this government, but if you look at the Key government taking over from the Clark government, Ardern taking over from the Key government, we didn't see that. Yes, but did they say that they would reverse a bunch of things? Did they or did they not? If they said they would, and then they failed to repeal all this stuff, well, then they're just useless. If they didn't say they would repeal these things, and they didn't repeal these things, well then they weren't voted to get rid of these things or change them, because obviously the electorate didn't deem it worthy enough at the election cycle to change these things. So you can't really blame a government for, or say that a government shouldn't do something simply because past governments haven't, when this government was literally elected to do as they are. Ardern's Labour put in place under urgency so many radical laws while they locked down and oppressed Kiwis. Real fascist, coalition isn't perfect, but a sense of freedom has returned. I concur. Why is my macro's not working? That is a crime against humanity. I apologize, everyone. I sincerely apologize. What was supposed to happen was our lovely Soviet music was supposed to starting, but whatever. Maybe next time. There was a shift in emphasis sometimes about how we move forward, but we didn't just come into government in 2017 and just jettison everything the previous government had been doing. We sought to build on it where there was a good foundation to build from. In an interview on the same episode of Te Ao Moana, Greens co-leader Chloe Swarbrick signalled her intention to make the Greens a lead party in opposition, and it's a move Hipkins described as optimistic, given young voters will be scrutinising parties to see which ones will be brave and bold. I love the presumption of the Greens that, you know, young voters will just naturally go and vote for them, and they want brave and bold from the likes of Hipkins. I want brave and bold, but not from anyone progressive, not from anyone that is going to destroy the world that we live in for ideology's sake. And when I mean brave and bold, I mean someone who will just stand up for their nation, who will actually do what they're elected to do what the people actually not want, not what they think the people want, or not what they pretend the people want. Do what they actually want. That's what I want by brave, and by bold I mean having the guts to stand up there and say what is true. To say it how it is. To be the Lee Donahue in a room full of women who can't even stand up for women. That's what I want to see. Lee Donahue for PM. Throwing it out there. We need that man. We need that man. Simply because he will say it how it is, if nothing else. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy he wasn't lower on the list, but I can understand why those who were on the New Zealand First list were in the order they were. It's fair enough. I think a lot of young New Zealanders also want to know that the plans that they're putting forward are credible and we're going to deliver on the things that we say we're going to do. So my goal for the next election is that we are going to have a bold plan for New Zealand's future, but it's going to be credible and it's not going to be deliverable. Now, before I finish this off, I'm going to have a quick break. I need to just reassess things. So I'll get the tunes back on. And everybody, please feel free to leave a few comments that I can have a look at whilst I'm taking a very quick moment away.
stay the night. Don't try to change my mind. Baby, please don't stay the night. I must do what's right. Don't make me ask you twice. Oh, don't stay the night. Don't try to turn it to a fight. You know I love you by my side. Just don't stay the night. I must do what's right. I'm done being polite. Oh, don't stay the night. Would you be waiting? Find you. I'm used to waiting. Are you? Would you be waiting there too? I'm used to staying. Would you? Would you be waiting? Dopamine when you send pictures. When you send pictures. Can't be waiting. Dopamine when you send pictures. When you send pictures. Would you be waiting? My days are brighter, my shoulders are so much lighter. Just for a moment there, I thought that there was nothing more to life. I thought about it, wrote a couple songs about it. Just for a moment there, I lost myself. Mind if I be real for a minute? It's almost like everything I feel had a limit. It now gone past, finding reasons to smile and to laugh and
Cheers, Matthew. I do definitely plan on doing more of them. So, definitely at least once a week. At least once a week. Definitely moving to more as time goes on. But yeah, I just need to find a system that works so far. I think it's going okay. But yeah, I think with a bit more time, get a bit more used to it, especially with the chat. The first time I had the chat on the screen. But yes, by the way, for people wondering, it's like the second sandwich I've made this year. But I needed some real hard and fast, quick calories. Because yeah, I was essentially dying. I have eaten today, but it's obviously not enough, so this is gonna have to suffice. But for dinner, it looks like I'm probably having keto pizza. I enjoy making them; very good. We basically just have this nice like keto base. It's really just like a thick wrap base, and then we just put cheese and meats on top. It's good, very good.
not let me fall back. But you'll be there, ready to rest.
Now, those of you unfamiliar with it, allow me to introduce you to Vibe Sparkling Water. Okay, this is the best stuff I have ever had in my life. I don't buy it nearly enough anymore, simply because I can't be arsed spending $12 a week for 10 cans. When it's on special at like $8 or $9, I'm in there. But yeah, it goes like hotcakes, and it's arguably the most enjoyable but healthy liquid you'll ever have. Let me just have a look right here. We're talking about 0.3 grams of carbs per can. And you're really only going to need a couple a day. And it's basically, it's something like, if you're someone who's really happy drinking water, it's a good thing to have just in your fridge as a treat. If you want something that tastes like fizzy, this one's cola flavor. It basically just tastes like a variation of a, of a cola drink. And it's very, very good. It really helped me through, if you're going into a diet like carnivore or keto, but you really need something sweet to take the edge off, get these. They are great. You don't even know that you're not drinking fizzy. Give that to a kid, and they'll think they're drinking fizzy. So I'd recommend it, actually. Especially if you want to keep your kids off the sugar. But they say, I want fizzy. But yeah. Wait. Back at it. And it is still a tragedy that my macros turned off.
I'm about to make a name for myself here.
Whatever. Moana Money Reports, honestly, I've done a couple videos with her in them. And when I say that, I mean me reacting to her, whether it be talking to David Seymour or others. So, she's something. Willie Jackson would know. When asked if he intends to lead the party into the next election, or is he the caretaker, Hipkins was once again unequivocal. No, I'm absolutely in this to win the next election. I had 9 months as Prime Minister. I learned a lot during that time. That means that I'll be ready to hit the ground running after the next election. He's delusional. If I had known that was the end, I would have ended before I went and got something to eat right there. My apologies. But hey. It ends with Chris Hipkins once again being delusional and none of us knowing what he's going on about. So, but I think early on we did cover just his fundamental belief with respect to Māori not seeing sovereignty is rooted on a lie and blind faith in academics, blind faith in courts who are relying on the bullshit of academics, and so forth. It's all nonsense. But I did want to touch on one more thing today. One more thing today, and you would be able to see it up here in the tabs list. And for those wondering, yes, this is my my study that I procrastinate about for the last 2 years. But yeah, you would have seen, I just want to have a quick look at the COVID-19 inquiry when the government confirming key issues going under the microscope, because this is an important issue that doesn't get nearly enough attention. So, may as well go into it, shall we not? Especially because this is is this today? It's either today or yesterday, I think. So, it's whatever. It's not too long either. So, the government has released detailed terms of reference for the next phase of the Royal Commission into the COVID-19 response. Here's what New Zealanders can expect to see out of it. When the Royal Commission of Inquiry into COVID-19 lessons was established in December 2022, the then Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said there had been no playbook for managing a pandemic of that scale. A pandemic of that scale. If it's a pandemic, it's always going to be at that scale. Okay, it's just a little word, a tip for the future. If it's a pandemic, it's at that scale. And it sounds funny that we didn't have a plan, considering that is something that a government should always have up their sleeve. What would happen if there was suddenly a global health emergency and everyone had to be on the lookout for this crazy virus going around? it should be common sense that we always have one of those up our sleeves. And for me, this is more of an excuse that we had no playbook for managing a pandemic of that scale, so that she could get away with doing whatever she wanted and say, oh, well, I tried my best. We didn't have a plan. Whatever. Some of the previous government's decisions around the pandemic response proved to be extremely contentious, so much so that both ACT and New Zealand First campaigned on expanding an inquiry into those decisions. Now the coalition government has finalised the detailed terms of reference for that inquiry. Here's what you need to know. Beginning a second phase. Though these terms of reference relate to phase 2 of the Royal Commission, the second phase begins in November and will feature new commissioners. The commissioners from phase 1 will resign from their roles, and when that phase ends on November 28. Minister of Internal Affairs Brooke Van Velden said in June that the second phase met the requirements of the government's coalition agreements to expand the inquiry while maintaining the integrity of the statutory inquiry system. At the time, New Zealand First leader Winston Peters said his party supported the second phase of the inquiry, but disagreed with allowing the concurrent inquiry to continue. It saw the coalition's agree to disagree provision invoked. What's up for a review now? The second phase of the inquiry will look at key decisions made by the government between February 2021 and October 2022 in relation to COVID vaccines and lockdowns during that period, which is very important. Specifically, the inquiry will look at vaccine mandates, the approval of specific COVID-19 vaccines, vaccine safety, including the monitoring and reporting of adverse reactions, the nationwide lockdown in August and September 2021 when the Delta variant of the virus was first detected in the community, the extended lockdown in Auckland and Northland in 2021, the testing and tracing technologies used over that time, specifically the impact of private sector involvement or non-involvement. Now, if we could go over all of these. The vaccine mandates, I mean, that is the number one thing that needs to be looked at. Let's be real. The fact that they mandated those, given what we know about the vaccines, is criminal. It is criminal that they were ever mandated, particularly in the way that they were mandated, by gaslighting us into pretending that they weren't mandated at all, when they quite clearly were. The approval of specific COVID-19 vaccines, I mean, approve any of them. They would have been shit. They were all shit. Some of them worse than others. Vaccine safety, including the monitoring and reporting of adverse reactions. Well, they just ignore all the adverse reactions anyway and pretend that it's just claims of adverse reactions. They're not necessarily happened. Whatever. The nationwide lockdown in August and September 2021 when the Delta variant of the virus was first detected in the community. I remember this so well because this was a very important part of my life in terms of time. Really when things dramatically changed for me as a coming into adulthood, re-entering the community, and it was very important. The extended lockdown in Auckland and Northland, it was a ridiculously long one, was it not? The testing and tracing technologies used over that time, specifically the impact of private sector involvement or non-involvement. I do recall it could be quite difficult getting your hands on testing, but some of you watching, you're probably like, who cares about testing? Thank you very much. None of that for me. I'm not taking a flu test. The second phase of the inquiry will also assess the effect and the COVID. The second phase of the inquiry will also assess the effect the COVID response decisions had on inflation, debt, and business activity, as well as on the health and education. As part of this, Phase 2 will examine whether those decisions reflected the advice given to decision makers at the time and whether they struck a reasonable balance between public health goals and minimising social and economic disruption. The terms of reference also list what's outside the scope of the inquiry. This includes particular clinical decisions made by clinicians or public health authorities, the operation of the general regulatory system for vaccines, recent reforms to the health system, and particular decisions made by Reserve Bank, among other matters. Reporting back. Grant Illingworth KC has been appointed as chair of Phase 2 of the inquiry. He will be joined by Commissioners Judy Kavanagh and Anthony Hill. The second phase begins in November and will include hearing evidence in the public when it's appropriate to do so. The final report with recommendations is due in February 2026. As is the case with all royal commissions, the inquiry won't have the power to determine the civil, criminal, or disciplinary liability of anyone over their actions. Well, it won't have the power to determine the civil, but I hope someone has the guts to say, having had a look at it, that we should pursue either civil, criminal, or disciplinary liability onto some people, and dramatically change how we deal with such things when a non-pandemic arises and we have an actual pandemic, because we don't want people abusing their power or looking at it as an opportunity to implement dramatic changes to our legislation to affirm their ideological beliefs, or to get to a place where our nation reflects their ideological utopia. So we all know utopias work out well for everyone. With all that being said, I think that'll do me today, people. I will sit here for a little bit longer. If anyone at all has questions I'd like me to answer, or has any points I want to raise, I can quickly read them out and have a little chat about them. In the meantime, I will find something interesting to look at and put the music back on. So, just give me a sec.
Rescue me if I go out of track. You can get away with it. 'Cause you make me love my imperfections, answer all my questions, just to show me what's on the other side of inhibition. No apologies, my baby. I do 'cause I'm feeling so good.
Sitting lonely in my room again, trying to find the words to say, but nothing comes out. I am looking for the better days, seem like they just stay away whenever I try. There's so many things that I keep in my mind. My friends keep me out and it hurts every time. With all the emotions I built up inside, oh why can't I? Will someone look for me if I disappear? No matter how much that I scream, nobody hears. But I see the light from far away, it's down the line. Maybe I should not give up without a fight, 'cause there will be a time. Oh, 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 oh. There will be a time. Oh, 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 oh. There will be a time.
Thanks, Kiwiana.
You lover, 'cause I'm falling in too quickly and I can't break free. Just hold me, lover. I need you, lover.
It's actually also good to see people watching from YouTube, because usually it's pretty X heavy. But I think we've actually got a good, I can't quite see from my screen here, but a good, well, I think earlier we had a good like 15 odd at one point. So why are my eyes red? Can't have that. It's starting to get dark now, so probably why the lighting is starting to play up. That's all right. But anyways, I'll be here for a second or two, but I'll bet it on the ending screen. Could not agree more, JT. Could not agree more. Just read it out for everyone that hasn't seen it. Hey everyone, just chipping in 2 cents. The case has to be made to allow Māori the dignity and grace of not being pandered to for being Indigenous. 100%. There is no need to pander to someone. That just diminishes who they are as a person. They are no more or less of an individual because of who they are, who their ancestors are, and so forth. So pandering only serves to other them. And as the Disinformation Project likes to say, othering people is inherently racist. Or extremist, in that case.
somebody to show the way. Yeah, I was a heartbeat with no sound till you came around. Yeah, you showed me colors, light in the darkness. You were the only thing I needed. Then we got older, but we stayed the same. Swear that we never lost the flame. Nostalgia, you're an echo in my head. Oh, nostalgia, like a symphony of our memories. Oh, nostalgia, don't you ever slip away. Oh, nostalgia, like a symphony of our memories. Oh, like a symphony of our memories. Oh, what if the years turn into gold? The longer we live, yeah, the more we grow. We could be 100 miles apart, but it's never far. Yeah, you show me colors, light in the